Sorry, I wanted to make a Godfather reference about the next generation.
Sorry for the delay, everyone, and getting things going because for some reason the thing wasn't loading. So, surprise! Hello.
Sorry, that got stuck in my mouth. I was trying to breathe and I couldn't.
Don't
I
choke.
was like, I can make this Godfather reference. I can do it.
It's worth making a Godfather reference, honestly. I'm glad that you did not choke, though, because that would be terrible in any situation, but especially in a live setting.
I only have my cat to give me the Heimlich maneuver.
Oh, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode 91 of Restitching the Tapestry. It's good to see all of you. We hope that you've been having a good week. We kept quite a bit to talk about tonight. But ultimately, we do just want to focus tonight on talking about reminiscing with millennials, of which Ari and I are both millennials. But before we do that, let's talk about how we've been doing and what we've been up to.
I have been working on classwork and avoid. Oh, did I tell you about the car chase?
You mentioned it to me, but I think the viewers need.
I don't want to
mention
mention too much because I'm making a video for my YouTube channel. But like, I got caught in a police chase, like in the middle of my apartment complex, and like a police officer asked me if I saw a guy with a gun like running through like near my car, and I said no, and I was like, it's just a thing. I don't know.
It's just a thing.
Like,
that's
I was
terrifying.
I'm just like Mercury retrograde. Like, at least I didn't die, but like, this is just kind of like a thing that's been happening with my family. We just been caught in these like really dramatic like police situations recently because my sister got caught in a situation where I don't want to get it too much into detail, but like she got caught in a situation where somebody had like unalived themselves behind her house and they were stuck in the trees for like 8 days. And so like it's just like a thing that has been happening in my family. Like there's just like a weird aura around our family right now because of Mercury retrograde. So like I don't want to talk too much about like stuff, but like it's just a thing that's happening right now.
Yeah, that's so unsettling when you think about it. Ooh.
So so I don't want to talk too much about details, but like things are just happening right now, and it's just a thing that's.
I mean, I can't say any equivalent things have been happening to me that are anywhere near the vicinity of that. I was sick this week, which you all know because I made a video about. I'm feeling astronomically better.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, I honestly every year early September happens, sinus infection, the seasonal change, so on and so forth. So like I'm better now. I just needed a day to take a break and rest up and recharge a little bit. So now I'm much better and I feel the energy that I did not have for 2 days.
Fantastic. Yeah, you need to take more breaks. I was talking to this about you. It's okay to take breaks. It's okay to rest. Like give yourself some time if you need it. Like don't push yourself too hard.
I need to grant myself that grace and get better with that. It's funny because I'm always telling people to do that, and it's just like, Donny, are you doing that though? Right.
Some people
and guess what? I'm not.
Some people give the best advice, but they don't take their own advice.
I know. I need to practice what I preach.
Right.
So let's do the show mission statement and then get on to our topics for tonight. So we live in a dynamic society where social media shapes us by creating greater opportunities for connection. It has led to a developing understanding of the adversity many marginalized communities face, the powers causing the adversity, and those who act as bystanders as atrocities take place in real time. Our goal with this show is to make connections and have challenging conversations about social topics, current events, pop culture, and art. Together, let's weave the threads of understanding with what privilege we have in order to learn, educate, and create in a world that's growing. So So we wanted to talk about some current events first, our current event snapshot segment here. So obviously we last week we talked about like the fact that Queen Elizabeth passed, and this week like obviously there's been like a lot of transition. King Charles III is now king of the UK, but there's also been a lot of things happening here in the United States. Senator Lindsey Graham announced that he is planning on, I don't know, I think that was today, he was planning on introducing a national abortion ban piece of legislation.
Yeah, we'll
Which
see how
is,
that flies.
yeah, right. And then also I read that the Democrats are wanting to codify protection against protection for same-sex or marriage equality. But then I also read some sources that said that they wanted to wait to do that until after the election season, and I'm just like, what? But it's, I don't know, like it's interesting the fact that these huge things that have everything to do with people's accessibility to resources, their rights, their body autonomy are being determined. Still, it's 2022, and the fact that these things are still being determined is just so unsettling to me.
It just feels like, we have all of these things like Y2K. It's like, all of these issues. It's like, are they coming back into fashion? Is it like fashionable to talk about them again? And like, it's just like we never quite get over these issues. It's just like we're rehashing them again. And it's like it's sort of like we have to distract people by talking about them again.
Right, yeah, exactly. And then the other thing that's been happening recently that has been really getting the internet in a tizzy, Disney dropped a teaser trailer for the live action film, The Little Mermaid, and they cast a Black woman to play Ariel.
Weren't they talking about this a few years ago? Wasn't this like something that was like
Yeah,
kind of all a buzz, but like they it kind of
yeah.
like died down for a while?
It
Because
was
I
in
feel like they
like,
were mentioning this like when I was in Seattle or just like after Seattle.
it
I
was
feel like
2017, and like because there were like rumors going around like what would the next live action Disney adaptation be, and they were talking The Little Mermaid. And even back then I remember it was causing a huge stir because people were so mad that they were casting a Black woman to be Ariel. And what's frustrating about this situation is, one, it's really drawn out a lot of like very racist people who, like, there are people who are like making Facebook groups like Christians against Disney's The Little Mermaid. Like it's so unsettling, on top of the fact that the Lord of the Rings series that's been in the process of being released, The Rings of Power, it's been being criticized because it has like three Black characters, like people who are cast who are Black, playing a dwarf, like a hobbit and an elf, and people are so mad about that too.
I just don't understand what it. I feel like they kind of like brought it up a few years ago to like try to test the waters, to like kind of like get it into people's awareness to kind of like, well, kind of like bring into awareness like this is how it's going to be received, and like to kind of like this, we know this is how it's going to be received, and to like kind of like garner, to kind of like know, test the audience. Like they
Mhm.
know that they're going to get this reaction now. Like they
Oh
knew that,
yeah.
they knew several years ago they were going to get this reaction and that this was going to happen. Like
Oh yeah.
I feel like they knew, like I feel like they mentioned it several years ago as a way to like test the waters and to kind of like figure out the audience reaction, to kind of like prepare for this now, because I feel like they wanted to like figure it, like they wanted to like prepare for this moment. You know what I mean? Like
Right. Well, when you think about it, the last 4 to 6 years, considering the leadership that we've had, um, there's been such an attack on, you know, diversity and inclusion, right? To
Right.
the point where now, like, any semblance of any person who's not cis, heterosexual, or white, any presence of any person is considered being woke. Like, oh, it's the woke mafia that's
Well, and
thrusting this upon.
and then there was like there was an uptick for a while because we had the Black Lives Matter movement, and the Black Lives Matter movement had a moment where people seemed to be inclusive, and it seemed to be like that we were making progress, and it seemed like things were going well, and that we were getting somewhere, that it
Yeah.
seemed like things were getting better. And then all of a sudden, 2001, and middle to end of 2001 and beginning of this year, it seemed all of a sudden it was just sort of like,
Oh, 2021. Yeah.
and it was like middle to end of 2021, beginning of this year, it was sort of like all of a sudden white people just sort of, it was like the majority of general white people kind of just dropped the ball, and they were just like, I don't care about Black Lives Matter anymore.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know what I mean?
that rhetoric just seeped back in, and I think it's a lot of it is the fact that a lot of other leaders who have exhibited like racism have been emboldened over the past year or so to just speak out about it and not fear any accountability or anything like that. So, and I see that it's just continuing to happen with media, and I'm personally I'm grateful that these films and shows are continuing to
Right.
cast diverse people,
I
because
just wish that people who were on the fence, who I just wish people who were on the fence, who it didn't matter to them either way, gave a crap still. You know what
oh
I
yeah,
mean?
I agree too. And I just wish a lot of those people would be open enough to realize that the reason why they don't care is because due to their privilege, representation doesn't directly impact them, right?
Right.
Um but like when you look at TikTok now, and because it's going viral on TikTok, like people posting reactions that their black children are having to seeing
Mm-hmm.
Ariel being black, like that's so powerful. And like and they're seeing that representation and it's meaningful. And we were talking about this in the back room, but like I was on TikTok yesterday, and one TikToker said that the reason why a lot of these, fandom communities are so resistant to diversity is because these fantasy worlds are their last protected sanctums where segregation is still allowed to take place, or where, having mostly white characters are allowed to take place, and they feel that, and they feel comfortable with that, and they don't want like diversity leaking into this ideal fantasy world,
Mm-hmm.
so which is
Yeah,
kind of unsettling when you think about it.
absolutely. And I really think that honestly, it's important that even in our fantasy spaces, our creative spaces, that we make room for Black people, BIPOC, that we give them space in our fantasy world, in our hobbies, because they deserve space there too.
Exactly, 100%. So, reminiscing with millennials.
Go from a really heavy topic. Well, I think we're going
Right.
to circle back to that topic later on, because I think we made a note for next season
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
talk
we
about that a
definitely
little
will
bit
be
more detail.
talking about, we'll have an entire episode where we talk about like white supremacy in fantasy worlds for sure. Um, so let's talk about, like, obviously a while back we thought of the idea of reminiscing with millennials, and I think that we really got excited about that because being that we're both millennials, we're just like we're always reminiscing about something, like we're always kind of getting lost in how things used to be. So we wanted to talk about that, and we have some pretty solid discussion questions today. I do want to check into the chat. Arby's here.
Kaiji
Arby's.
Kim came on at 12:30 at night.
Shout out to Kaiju Kim. Oh my goodness. If I would have seen that earlier, we would have found a way to get you on as a guest for that. We could always have a part 2, of course. And then Arpy says people being upset about this is ridiculous. Yep. I agree completely. Well, hopefully we'll see a few more people cycle in and participate in the chat. We'll see. It's kind of a quiet night so far.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Sleepy like the sleepy millennials.
They probably saw the title and they were like, "Oh God, we're gonna have to."
You know what it is?
These.
Millennials are probably all in their PJs, cozied up, looking at their phones, dead inside, drinking their
looking at
IPA beards. I have my. Oh wait, hang on. Can I do it?
That was some high-speed art there.
Did it work? Did my little mustache?
Oh, it worked. It worked wonders. So, okay. Question. Why are millennials so nostalgic about the 90s and 2000s? And do you find yourself reminiscing a lot?
So I reminisce about the 90s and the 2000s, but I find myself mostly because of college reminiscing about the 2010s, like more often than not, just because that was like my time to shine was the 2010s. But honestly, 90s were a lot of fun too.
So what made the 2010s, in your opinion, your time to shine?
Because that was when I was feeling myself. I was in college. I was living life, living large. Music was fashion. I'm wearing the skinny jeans. I had the fashion. I was sex pots. I was living in the dorms. I was fantastic time. Fantastic time. Life was great. Living life, living large.
I feel that way about college too. Like for me, late 2000s, early 2010s, like actually kind of like the tail end of high school as well. Like mid to late 2000s, early 2010s, like for some reason is just so nostalgic to me. I do think that the music especially draws me in because that's like the first point in my life where I was listening to this rebellious music and feeling like I was becoming the person that I am. Not only that, but also, I guess, feeling a certain degree of confidence in putting myself out there and being myself. It felt so new. And I think that when we experience newness for the first time, that's like that's like a pivot point for like our memory to cling on to, if that makes sense.
But I do love the music from the 90s and early 2000s. Like the music from that time. Like I'll be in the grocery store and you'll hear that music. It hits something different, right? We like bring back to high school or bring back to like middle school or like even when you're in elementary school. Like my sister puts on the pop station when I'm in the car with her because we'll be like driving around doing deliveries and stuff. I don't know what it is, but sometimes I'll hear like Mariah Carey or like that just hits different,
When it comes to like pop, like the ones that really like Michelle Branch, whenever I hear like Michelle Branch music, I'm just like early 2000s supernova in my brain.
Brandi Carlile.
Like Arpy says, I love grunge, pop punk, and new metal. So like obviously I would be remiss if I did not say Evanescence during this stream at one point or another, right? So obviously that's like that band is a huge point of nostalgia. Linkin Park as well. Green Day, oh my God, Green Day.
Green Day. Yep. I every day when I lived in Seattle, I would hear Nirvana. I hear Nirvana every day.
Oh
Every
yeah,
day.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's why we're nostalgic about it too, is because like that music is like that tether to those moments, right?
My favorite station in that I listen to now, I hear Pearl Jam, but I hear the old stuff and I also hear their new stuff. It's fantastic. It's so great.
Oh
I,
my
I I
goodness.
hear I hear Under the Bridge and then I hear their new stuff and I'm just like, it does something different. It's so good.
It hits different.
It's something different. It's so good.
Oh my goodness. I feel the exact same way. Um so do you think all generations tend to experience nostalgia? Do you think it's universal?
I really do. I think Gen X I Gen X is, everybody says that there's like these huge divides between generations, but we grew up with Gen X. Gen X is just like our older siblings. They're just basically like my older sister Nicole, she's Gen X.
Hmm.
She's only like 6 years older than me. She's Gen X. Like she's right there with me. Like they're our older siblings,
Oh
and Gen
yeah.
Z is basically like our younger siblings, or like or or just below. Like they're so close to us in age that they're basically like either our just before our children or our siblings. Like they're so close to us in age that they basically grew up with us. Like there's very little separation between the two of us.
Right. It's interesting because like I know a lot of Gen Xers, like they find like the 90s to be very nostalgic, right? Because that's when they were like coming of age, graduating, like late 90s especially. I know like Heather and I, because Heather is a bit older than both of us. She is like on the cusp of Gen X and millennial. Like
She's an elder millennial.
yeah, like she often expresses like loving that like late 90s like grunge music, right? But when I think about like boomers, like both of my parents are boomers, and they get very nostalgic about the 80s, about like the music, the styles, etc. And when we think about it, like I think as a decade, for some reason the 80s I think is universally nostalgic, probably because we grew up looking to our parents finding nostalgia out of that.
So
Like
technically speaking, my mom is a boomer, but my stepdad is technically a Gen Xer. So my mom will listen to a lot of the boomer music, but my stepdad will listen to like music from the 70s and 80s. So
right.
he's like in that in between stage where he'll listen to boomer music, but he'll also listen to like acid rock and like a lot of like, you know, heavy metal, like heavy rock metal, like, you know, hits from the 70s and 80s, that kind of music. You know what I'm talking about?
Well,
That type of music.
and when you think about it, like that nostalgia is kind of bled into visual media too. Like I can't stop Stranger Things, the show Stranger Things. I
Yeah.
mean, it takes place in the 80s. It embodies a lot of like that practical effect 80s horror aesthetics. Like like John Carpenter's The Thing, like like films like that. And and I can't help it like even when I watch it, I was born in the 80s, but I don't remember the 80s. I was like 2 years in the 80s, right?
Oh, I
But
remember the 80s.
like I remember like the only things I remember are like brown shag carpet, terrible wallpaper, and that's about
I
but
remember
like
Puffalumps. Puffalumps were big in the 80s.
oh yeah,
Teen Witch was big in the 80s.
scrunchies.
Scrunchies.
Granted, a lot of this stuff's coming back though too. Like we see like a lot of fashion trends from the 80s coming back, which I find interesting.
No, we're past the 80s. 80s were like maybe about 8 or 9 years ago.
Oh,
We're
okay.
past the 90s now. We're into Y2K fashion now.
Oh, yeah, that would explain like a lot of like high-rise jeans
We're on low-rise jeans.
or
We're on
low-rise jeans, I meant.
low-rise jeans. Size 0 has come back. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yes. And did you know that, oh man, body positivity is like suffering a hit right now. Did you know that the new Torrid line, the plus size fashion brand, they had no plus size models on their new line?
What?
They were all mid-size. They had to pin the clothes on the models, and they basically put a thing on there that said you could size up 3 sizes.
Oh
So
my
they were basically like
goodness.
telling skinny people to buy plus size clothing.
What?
Yes.
That's baffling to me.
That was that. So basically they were trying to co-opt plus size clothing for skinny people. They're trying to, and like, so like they're trying to gaslight, and like, so basically like they photoshopped all of the pins off the clothing to make it seem like they didn't do that. Like, oh man, it's like a huge thing right now. It's all over. It's like,
I've not seen that. That's wild though.
because I'm on TikTok with all the plus size body positivity, and it's like it is a ruckus right now. And like Y2K fashion is back. Zero, double zero, triple zero is back. Oh my god,
You
it's a
want to
mess.
something that's really nostalgic that hit me like a ton of bricks the other day. So I was on TikTok and TikTok seems to be the theme of the day today, right? Um, and somebody made a TikTok about how in middle school and high school every morning we had to watch Channel 1 news.
Oh my god,
Do you remember that?
Lisa Ling,
Anderson Cooper,
yes.
Daddy Cooper. Did I say that? Anyway, like, and I just was like, wow, like I completely forgot about Channel 1 News on those horribly old TVs.
Yes, and like it was just a marketing ploy to get you to buy Snapple and Skittles
Yep. Yeah. Oh my, it's so
and
true.
Starburst. Oh my god, that's where they first saw the berries and cream ads.
I think I remember seeing like, you know, that like, was it like chocolate milk, like that Yoo-hoo stuff or whatever it was called?
Yes.
That was one of the marketing things I remember too. Like it was
It would be like 15 minutes of ads and like 5 minutes of news.
right.
and they and they would be like in Pakistan or something, like doing like hard hitting news, and be like, "Oh my god, I cannot believe they're like doing this like really." And they'd be like with Pashtuns and stuff, and be like doing these really hard hitting like super serious stories, and then it'd be like 10 minutes of just like starburst ads and like the Snapple where they were clicking the tops, and I was like, I cannot handle this. This is like super intense
It
news.
became like a stimulation, like because I
Do
remember
you
I
know what
used
I'm
to do
talking about?
that.
Where they were clicking, they're doing like the they would do like Morse code with the ad with the
Hmm.
Morse code with the Snapple lids, and like I that was a memory unlocked. But
You
like,
know, it's interesting. Arby mentioned in the comments a 9/11, and I remember like 9/11, like in Channel One News and stuff like that. Like, I'm always curious about like 2001 and exploring like the headspace of those of us who were kids at that time and what we had to experience.
what
And
grade were you in when it happened?
I was in eighth grade.
Oh, you're so much younger than I was. I was in 11th grade.
Yeah, I'm what 2 or 3 years younger than you, I think, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
like I remember like I was about to enter high school. I wasn't quite in high school yet. I was still in middle
I
school.
was so scared. I thought it was going to be nuclear war. I kept
Oh, me
looking around.
too.
I kept looking around at the people around me, and I thought that like I kept looking at the guys' faces, and I was like, "You're all going off to war. You're all going to die." I kept looking at faces. I was like, "There's going to be a draft." I was like, "There is no way that this is not going to affect the people around me." I was like, "There is definitely going to be a war." I was
Mhm.
like, this is the beginning of the end."
Oh
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah. I remember feeling the same way, and for like a good like Like, I remember that whole day at school, we watched TV. We didn't even do classes. The
No,
next,
they turned off the TV. We weren't allowed to watch TV. We weren't allowed to watch any of it.
oh, we watched the whole thing. Like every classroom had the TV on. The next week, actually, the television, like for classes, like we did stuff, but like the TVs were constantly on. Like when the war in Iraq started,
Mm-mm.
for example, as well. Like, and it's just there's something in me that clicks when I also see like certain types of news coverage. It's like a very dark nostalgia where it's like, ooh, like there's a place there where
I try not to look at September 11th stuff anymore because I try not to like reinvigorate the trauma of September 11th.
yeah.
Also, I found out that Gen Z is very traumatized by us talking about it because
Hmm.
it's sort of like they're so disembodied from that trauma, and like it traumatizes them to like talk about that it's just like that they see videos of people jumping out of windows and stuff, and it's just like it's very
Yeah.
traumatizing for them, and it's just like a trauma that they never, like they have to re talk about. So like I didn't even mention it this year. I was like I knew that it was
Hmm.
that it happened, but I was just like, I'm not going to post about it, I'm not going to talk about it, I'm never
Mm.
going to talk about this ever
Yeah, I
again.
didn't post about it either. Like, and it's very much kind of like a trauma bonding when you think about it too.
Right. And I was just like, I'm never going to talk about this again because I never want to make a millennial or make Gen Z feel bad for something that I experienced. And I just
Hmm.
want to shield them from the fact that, like, I experienced this because I dealt with all of the stuff that I went through with it. Like, they don't need to experience, like, stuff that I experienced that day. Like, I've
Right.
worked through it. Like, it's, it's not a thing that I have to deal with anymore. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Well, and the truth is though, like as a nation, I think we were traumatized by it. And I don't think as a nation we care as much about mental health as we should, which is why I think a lot of people do still suffer from it, and continue to perpetuate that trauma as
Mhm.
well. Um, so like let's talk about the opposite of like the darker nostalgia. So do you have like a perfect safe place where you reminisce that's in the back of your mind, like a specific memory, a place, a moment?
Like a personal memory?
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. It's when I was a little kid. It's it in my memory, it's always summer. It's always the height of summer, probably late July to mid-August. It is probably anywhere from 80 to 90 degrees out. The cicadas are going, the crickets are going, the pool is running because I have this Olympic sized pool in my backyard. Set the scene, right? It is crispy hot. Mom has kicked us out of the house, of course, because it's summer and that's just the thing to do. Library books in tow, but discarded because whatever, it's not time to read those yet. Run out the back door, past the patio, down the first hill, past the swing set, through the backyard, past the sand pit, past the eagle's nest that is always unfinished, through the backyard, into the trees, past the picker bushes, into the darkness of the forest. That is my memory.
Oh, I got goosebumps. Ooh. Um, Mine similarly is in the late summer, like just kind of like around this time of year, like August, September. I am outside. It's hot and so like I always feel like when I was a kid, summer seemed so much more humid.
Right?
But also I wasn't affected by it either as a kid. Like I didn't
Right.
care.
Always have a
Um,
tan. Always have a tan, right? As a
yeah,
kid.
I remember being outside playing in a sandbox, like a gravel area, hearing tractors in the distance, birds in the distance. The sun is sinking into the west, and in the distance, I hear thunder rumbling very lightly.
Nice.
And it's that moment, like right before a thunderstorm, where like it feels like the atmosphere is inhaling
Oh yeah.
and everything gets so still. And then I'm summoned to come back to the house, like, get inside, like it's about to storm. And then it just storms. And I remember when I was a kid, I was like, there was this interesting transition. Like, I was terrified of thunderstorms for like up until like 8 years old. And then for some reason, I got obsessed with them.
Mm.
But I remember like the reason why I love trees so much and the reason why I talk about trees so much, even in my poetry, for heaven's sakes, is because I spent so much time, like my biggest point of nostalgia is simply just watching trees, like watching them in the wind, watching, like looking at the horizon and seeing a tree and being like, I want to go on an adventure and find where that tree is. You know?
Yeah.
Oh God, that made me emotional.
I love it. It's so nice.
Mm. Oh my goodness.
And I wonder if does Gen Z go on adventures like that? Do they? And
I
like
don't know.
yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question. I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I do feel like that. I don't know. Like, as kids, I feel like we are very much more in touch with the world around us, at least the natural world around us. And as adults, we kind of lose that because everything becomes an assembly line of cycles. Like and of productivity, output, work, and meeting these different social expectations. But as kids, we didn't have to worry about that all the time.
I just feel like we were the last generation that knew what it was like to not deal with technology.
Right.
Like we
Yeah.
were the cusp generation. And I feel like Gen Z did not know what life was like before technology. Like
Right.
they're the first ones who grew up with technology. So they don't know. So I feel like they have a hard time like putting down the cell phone
Hmm.
because they just don't know what it's like without it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I feel like it's not that we're the most balanced because we are not the most balanced with technology, but I feel like we at least have the semblance of knowing how to regulate technology.
Well, I would even argue that some millennials don't know how to do that. Like, I know, like, for example, like in conversations, like maybe let's think at work, in conversations about technology, people might have like a resistance against technology and be like, well, we don't need technology to do this. I'm always the first person to argue in favor of technology, mostly because I do remember growing up without technology, but because I've experienced so much, I can't fathom going back to a time and reliving without that level of connection to people, because I feel like nowadays there is such an astronomically different connection that we have to one another
That's true.
than we used to. It's scary when you think about it. And I think elements of it are unhealthy because when there are moments where we do have to disconnect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we know how to do that anymore?
Ah, hmm,
That's the
hmm,
question, right?
hmm.
We could
Good
have a whole episode about that.
question. Yeah.
Writing that down right now.
Uh, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've lived in places where technology was spotty at best.
Oh, same.
I lived at the Grand Canyon where it was dial-up speed, and
Uh,
I had a flip phone, and so I basically lived without. I didn't have for maybe about 2 years. I didn't have a smartphone,
mhm.
so I learned what it was like to live without it during kind of like the growing height of. So like coming back into society, it was like I I learned how to like not so like and like I've learned how to regulate myself. I just sometimes I go into these like obsessive moments, but like
Mhm.
I know how to like pull away and like
Yeah.
I can leave. Sometimes I forget my cell phone, like, and I don't think that that's a normal millennial thing to like just, oh, I didn't bring my cell phone, like I just left it at home, and I don't think that that's a normal millennial action, like to not have your cell
Yeah.
phone on you.
Yeah. Well, and I've also had to learn how to disconnect as well. Like how to like just live in the moment and
Hmm.
experience, like that's why like I love going on walks so much, is because like walks allow me to kind of lose myself in nature for a while, right? And not be so integrated and connected with technology. RP says, I have good memories from school and hanging out with my cousins.
Hmm.
That's good. That's good. Um, so what's the next question? What's the next thing we should explore? Hmm.
Why does it seem like Gen Z is making fun of this stuff millennials hold dear? There's a TikTok woman that says doggo, adulting, and I just had 47 coffees.
It's because we millennials have had to cling on to some very mundane things.
We've had a lot of weird coping mechanisms over the years, I think, through our
Right.
traumas.
And they are funny when you think about it. Now that we can like pull
We've lived through
ourselves
the
away.
BuzzFeed. We've lived through the BuzzFeed era. That's what it was. All of that stuff is from the BuzzFeed era.
Ooh, BuzzFeed. Does BuzzFeed still exist?
I don't know. I don't want to look it up. Do you?
I'm kind of curious, but I can't imagine it doesn't, but it's maybe is it fading like MySpace? Like no, do you remember MySpace?
I do. But I think MySpace still exists.
It does like that. That is nostalgia.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, but that's where doggo and adulting and all of that stuff came from. Is from the BuzzFeed era.
Oh
Is
yeah.
like it was it was that self starter generation of like I need to do all of this stuff because I'm coping with the fact that the economy has just collapsed and we're in this major recession. And I'm trying to stay positive and be this happy go lucky person because I need to try to market myself to get through the fact that uh, there's no prospects for me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I went through school and they didn't teach me any life skills.
Yeah. I remember thinking that too. Like once I hit college, and like there I had to do a lot of coping, because it's like I didn't know a lot of these life skills. I didn't know how to navigate
Like
different
didn't nobody taught you how
things.
to do your taxes? Nobody taught you how to apply for student loans. Nobody taught you how to do a car loan or apply for a house or
Hmm.
do any of the basic stuff that you needed to do. Like nobody taught you like because we were like the generation that parents put us in front of PBS and just like try to figure it out ourselves.
No,
And
and it's kind of like a perpetuation of that, like pull yourself up by the bootstraps American dream thing, right? Like, well, like my grandfather walked to school up a hill in a winter snowstorm 10 miles, kind of a thing. If they can do that, so can you.
but it was like parents of our generation just were very hands off and just didn't teach our generation. Well, my parents, my mom was very hands on, so I learned how to do some basic
Oh,
skills.
same here.
But a lot of
Yeah.
parents didn't teach kids basic life skills like how to cook for themselves. Like that's why a lot of people are overweight in our generation is because they order takeout so often and they're so hooked on takeout because they don't know how to cook for themselves. They don't know how to
Hmm.
do basic cooking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad too. I mean, and the truth is, I wonder if a lot of people of our generation were like, I don't want to say neglected necessarily, but like had this hands off learning curve. I wonder if that's because the parents of those kids had parents themselves that were like, I don't want to say helicopter parents, but like just like so involved and like.
Well, no, their parents. So their parents were boomer parents. So their parents were just like, go outside and like just do your thing and come home at sunset. Though that's millennial parents, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So they were just like hands off, like figure it out. Like you have to figure it out yourself. Like you just have to whatever. And like we're not going to teach you anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but their parents were the greatest generation parents. So their parents taught them basic life skills and taught them and were like very involved in their lives. So
Yeah, that's true.
but like, so the problem is that like boomers are, and this is from my experience, is that the greatest generation parents were like, had their own traumas and were kind of, and this is from my family, they were also kind of self-absorbed in their own ways. So it's just like generational trauma kind of passed down through its own.
It's so true. And it affects each future generation differently as well.
Right. So it's just its own thing. It's just its own thing.
Like boomers have always been measured against the greatest generation, right?
Right.
And there's like this
Like
kind
we
of
went
like,
off to war, we went through the Great Depression.
and I think that that's where like this capitalistic 9 to 5 thing emanated from, right? Because that was their way of trying to demonstrate their worth. And then like I know like we have in our notes that like Gen X like because like we have a question that asks, did millennials make fun of Gen X the way that Gen Z is making fun of millennials? What's the difference? We noted that Gen X, like one thing that a lot of people associate with being Gen X is being apathetic and jaded. Millennials were happy-go-lucky yet depressed. Gen Z is ruthless and cutthroat, right? So like I think that like that trauma has affected each generation differently.
Right.
And we've tried to cope with it in astronomically different ways.
Right. We're all just trying to suffer through capitalism, baby.
Right. And we could have like we could do like multiple episodes on that.
And
like,
this is just American generations. We're not even talking about global generations, because global generations are totally different and do different things completely.
Not to mention we're not considering the fact of how like other identifiers like intersect with being of different generations as well, like an LGBTQ plus person who's a boomer and their experience versus an LGBTQ plus person who is a millennial, right? Mm-hmm. Or you know, for women, for BIPOC people, right? Like there's so many different variables that change the landscape,
right?
Yeah. Well, Arby, I'm glad you're in the chat tonight because it's a quiet.
We're just having a conversation amongst ourselves.
Right. So let's see. What do we want to explore next? Ooh, do you still listen to the radio?
I do. I listen to the radio all the time. I even have it on my phone. Let me show you. I turned my phone off because I didn't want to be disturbed.
Oh, it's probably a good thing because we don't want music playing in the background anyway. But I do like, so I sometimes will listen to the radio if like my phone isn't connected to my car because I have like Bluetooth, so I'll listen to like Amazon Music or something. But like the other day I turned on the radio for the first time and I was like, I don't recognize any of this music. And I was just like, am I out of sorts? Like, and then like they're like some radio stations have like this throwback hour, like this oldies hour. Guess what I heard on it?
What'd you hear?
Evanescence's Bring Me to Life. I heard on the oldies hour. And I was just like, I like felt like I was immediately like desiccating and crumbling. And
you don't listen to like playlists on YouTube at all? Like the new kids, like the playlists like the young people put out?
Sometimes I do. Like I know like a lot of new music that I am exposed to like would be music that's going viral on TikTok typically.
I'll share some playlists with you that I listen to, like
Yeah, I would love that.
the young kids, the kids put out, the hip kids put out on the.
I want to be hip. I'll do
I'm not.
anything.
I'm definitely not hip. I just like to diversify my music listening.
Oh, RP. I used to listen to my MP3 player, but now I just listen to Spotify. If there's anything that's nostalgic, it's like old music devices. So, okay, when I was a kid, we had a record player. I remember having a record player.
I have a record player.
Oh yeah, and now as an adult, we have a record player. I'm just like, we're gonna buy records because records have kind of gotten popular again.
Right.
I remember having a terrible cassette player that didn't work half the time. I had like 2 or 3 CD players. I would go through CD players like Kleenex.
I have records that go back to the 60s, the 50s.
Oh yeah. Well, we were going through my grandma's house because my grandma passed away a few years ago.
Right.
She had like original released Elvis records that hadn't even been taken out of the packaging.
What?
Speaking of
Did you
nostalgic.
keep them? Did you keep them?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And mind you, Elvis is not my cup of tea. Respect Elvis.
Can we listen to them? Because
probably not on YouTube.
I've grown to really like Elvis. Recently.
We can have like a video date where we listen to Elvis together. I'm so paranoid about YouTube these days.
Just recently, I've started to really, really like Elvis.
Well, Ari, it is your homework assignment to get me into Elvis because I feel like I'm missing out.
Oh my God. It's, you know what it is David Lynch got me into Elvis. He started recommending Elvis, and I just started listening to Elvis all the time, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know about Elvis. And I was like, oh, but I do like Elvis because Elvis is based all of his music on Black singers and creators because he was in that like Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started listening to the Black creators that he was doing his music based on. And I was like, oh, now I really like Elvis because all of the people that he was basing his music on, they're really amazing creators. And then I was like, well, I really like Elvis.
So you kind of like went down like this little wormhole.
I really did. I really did. And I was like, and then I watched the Elvis movie and I was like, God, I really do like Elvis. I was like, God, I don't want to like Elvis, but I really do like Elvis.
Bring me back to life, you meant. Yeah. Amy Lee Forever, it's good to see you, by the way. Hope you're doing well. Here's an interesting question. And this is one of your questions. If there's one thing that you wish would stay in the past forever from your childhood, what would it be? Is there something?
Bullying.
Well, oh yeah, 100% bullying. Yeah, that would be my answer too.
If bullying never was a thing ever again for any future generation, it could just stay there forever.
Oh yeah, for sure. One thing that could stay in the past for me when I was a kid would be like this obsession. Like, and this kind of like ties into like toxic masculinity expectations for men, like this incessant pressure to do sports. I have nothing against sports. Like there's some that I enjoy, but like there was like this performative pressure of like, you will demonstrate your value if you do this, if you do that. And I would like that to be a thing of the past. That can stay in the past. One thing from the past that I would like to have in the present would be being a musician again. Music used to be my life. I played the saxophone for 15 years. Like I sang, like I play the piano. Like I would love to do all that stuff again. And I just don't do that anymore. I should though.
One thing that I wish were a thing is just being able to go up to somebody and being like, hey, can we be friends? And then just immediately being friends with somebody.
Oh yeah, that would be nice. Arby says creepy dolls and bullying. Amy Lee forever. Amy Lee forever, we adore you. Lagiacris is here. maybe everybody was just had plans this evening. That's totally understandable. Now everybody's cycling in. RP says, I wish we could have Chester Bennington from Lincoln Park back. Yes, I agree. A lot of like people who have passed.
I remember the day that Chester died because I was in Seattle. I was going to work that day and I was like, oh, that's really sad that he died.
Oh, that day was a blur to me. I remember like because I lived with two of my good friends and we just because we all
Seattle was a wreck. Seattle was such a wreck.
Oh yeah. We were scheduled to meet them at a concert. Like we had meet and greet tickets 2 weeks after that. So like it was rough. It was a rough few days. Lagiacra says, I was on a backpacking trip when I heard that Chester died. RP found out on DeviantArt. Yeah, that was a really, really difficult day. Yeah, I wish we could bring back lost people. Do you think that you're stuck in memories as a millennial, or are you still growing and expanding? How has your life peaked?
I feel like a lot of people's lives have peaked, but mine hasn't.
It's an interesting question. Because I had this conversation with somebody the other day, like, Donny, what dreams do you have? And my two dreams were becoming a teacher and becoming a published author. And both of those things have happened. So I'm kind of just like, I guess I am still growing and expanding. And I do still have some dreams. Like, I really want to go to Japan one day.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get into music again. Like those are dreams of mine. Like one of my dreams, like I used to always want to be like a musician, like a very active, committed musician. It's one of the other artistic thresholds that I have not broken through. How about you? You said you feel like your life hasn't peaked and that your peak is still on the horizon.
Mm-hmm. I want to run a marathon. And I want to write a screenplay and make a movie. I want to be a director.
That's going to be amazing. I could totally see you doing all of those things.
I think that I think that you have a bigger book in you than what you've already created so far.
Oh, thank you. I guess part of me feels that too.
Not that your books aren't amazing and that they're great now,
for sure.
but I feel like you have something so big in you that the world cannot deny you or ignore you.
And I feel that way about you too. I do. I feel like the world has barely even touched what you are able to put into it. If that makes sense.
I don't know. I just don't think I'm ever going to be, I don't ever think I'm going to be like this big, fancy, famous person, honestly.
Well, and maybe the thing is like, because I don't see myself being this famous person either. But I do think that we will have a legacy.
Hopefully.
And I think that it's like, because what we create is an extension of who we are, right?
Right.
So like, I feel like in life, like speaking of that question, I feel like people can have multiple peaks. I kind of think like, I know like a lot of like people, especially when we're talking about pop stars, like people will be like, oh, well, that person peaked a decade ago. But like, really, I do feel like people can have multiple peaks, right?
Yeah.
They might take on different forms, but I do think that they're possible. Let's see.
I don't know. My favorite Britney is Breakdown Britney.
Oh,
although
my favorite Gaga is Born This Way Gaga.
Although, it's still around the corner. You know, there could be a Brittany that I haven't seen yet that's still like out there.
That's true. That is true. So the average world age is about 30. Are they the ones that drive culture? And are they following the culture? What do you
Is
think?
anyone older than that following the culture, and anyone younger than that one following
Uh,
them?
what do you think?
I think that young people are the ones that drive culture, and everyone is just following that tide.
I think so too. I think so too. I mean, I do think that all ages have some influence, but I also think that there is sort of like this passing of the torch,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. Now, whether or like, I mean, if we consider politics right now, like there's still a lot of contention with whether or not the torch is being passed and allowed to be passed, right?
Right.
Amy Lee Forever says, probably not fancy, that's boring, but famous definitely. My crystal ball says so. uh, I think the reason why we reminisce as millennials, to kind of like put the bow on top of the episode here, I think reminiscing allows us to continue dreaming and experiencing a world of wonder. Because I think that one big thing that we reminisce a lot about is just like that childhood space that we were in where we like could see everything and it was so much more vibrant and huge. And I think we reminisce because we always want to be in that place because there's a sense of security in it. There's a sense of being free and expressive, you know.
I heard someone say that your higher self, your higher like 5D, higher thinking self is actually your inner child. So that's interesting that you say that, because
Mm.
it's like saying when you reminisce about your past and when you're reminiscing about like who you were when you were in the 90s and 2000s as a millennial, it's more like you're going back to that self, you're going back to that higher self of who you were, and that you're seeking that inspiration of who you want to be in the future. Maybe.
Ooh, Ari, that gave me goosebumps. Ooh, that's a great way to like conclude our episode tonight, in my opinion. We are growing, my friends. We are continuing to grow, and let us immerse ourselves in reminiscence. Reminiscence? Reminiscent? I don't know. One of those words.
I don't know. All I know is I'm drinking beer out of a mason jar.
You know, some might consider that hipster.
That's exactly why I did. I wasted a beer because the first beer that I poured was all head. And I was like, I need to get another beer because I'm not going to drink all head beer. I am not a frat boy. I'm not mad at you, Amy. I promise.
Oh. No, you're good. No, you're good. You're good. Neither of us
Amy,
are
you're
upset.
like one of my favorite people. I'm not mad at you.
Amy, you fill our chat with such wholesomeness and humor, and we really love that so much. I
I
just
just
don't
didn't
put
have
on
anything to say. I was just agreeing with everything you were saying. I just didn't know
right.
what to say.
The only thing I don't typically post the sultry comments, mostly because, you know, rated G. At least I try to be rated G. Blink, blink, blink. But we love you. We love all of you, and we really appreciate you tuning in and listening to us talk about a whole variety of different things. All right, my friends. Well, we are going to bid you adieu for the evening, but stay tuned for next week, of course. And we hope that you have a great rest of your week. Love you. Bye.
Bye.